All
Yes.
right, it's 12:02.
All
We
right.
can keep talking weather for the rest of the time here today, but we're not going to because you all are here to join us to discuss mailing lists in Razor's Edge NXT. Um, Here's our agenda for today. This is going to look very similar. If you've joined us before, we're going to do a little introduction. We're going to do some poll questions, and then we're going to get right into the content, which is a little bit of housekeeping. We have Katie watching the chat and the Q&A kind of in the background. So if you have any questions about anything we discussed today, feel free to drop that into the chat, into the Q&A. We'll try to answer them in real time, but we have a slide at the end for us to address any questions that we may have missed. Our webinar today will be recorded. I will send out the slide deck and the recording on Friday. And so you will have that by the end of the week for sure. Christine, actually, before we get introductions, I've done this a few times in the months in the past where I asked ChatGPT or Gemini in this example to redo our pictures. We were just talking about temperature, how hot it is, just about everywhere in the country. I'm in Cincinnati. Christine is down in North Carolina. Very, very hot in both of our locations. So I asked ChatGPT. It gave Christine some sunglasses. Gemini gave me a Hawaiian shirt and some sunglasses. I don't know if that's better than our normal headshots or not. But Christine, please, we'd love to get an introduction.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Christine Robertson. I'm the services manager here at NPact. I am based in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, where it is a very sunny and hot 95 degrees today, which isn't actually abnormal for us for this time of year. So I feel like I probably shouldn't complain as much as I have been. But I love getting to be part of these webinars and working with our Razor's Edge and Virtuous customers in consulting projects.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Kevin Wood. I'm the director of sales here at NPact. I hail from Cincinnati, Ohio. I worked in the nonprofit world for 15 years, and I've been here at NPact for almost 3.5 years, being a Razor's Edge consultant, which is one of the things I could talk about for hours, but we only have 41 more minutes to talk about today. So we're going to get right into it. First, and here at NPact, we're a Blackbot channel partner. But that does not mean we have any insider information about the functionality that you all are experiencing of things moving from database view to web view. So we get this information at the same time you do. Some really good places and good resources to look and see kind of what's new. Blackbot puts out their updates when you log into WebView, that very first screen on your homepage. You get a what's new section. They seem to update that information about once a week. I took a screenshot this morning of the newest one. We have a keynote speaker for BBCon, but we also have the ability to delete funds in WebView for a lot of us. And then also from last week, a lot of cool functionality that's moving over for campaigns and appeals as well. So make sure you check out that What's New section. Also, there's a link here for the product update briefings that happened last month. Blackbaud came and talked about their roadmap for Razor's Edge and other products as well. I believe that link should be live when I send you the slide deck, but you can go and watch the recordings of all of their product update briefings that they did for all their products. Now, we're going to jump into our participant polls. You should see those pop up here in a second on your screen. We would love for you to answer those. We've got a couple of them that you'll see here. So, what is your primary role at your organization? How long have you been using Razor's Edge? And what is your relationship with your Razor's Edge NXT database? I should also note that we are now, if you've been with us we've been doing this for over a year and a half now. We started in Zoom. We went to Teams for a few months. We're back in Zoom now, which is all we're very excited about. So our polls look a little different than they normally do. Um, but
Abby, we should have put wear all the hats. I debated that as an option and
yeah,
I didn't. And now that you answered it in the chat, that's what I have to do for next time.
yeah, all of the above is a great option.
Aaron,
Yeah.
we have to
Uh,
back butt on that, but they have said it will be totally phased out at some point. They've given some tentative dates, but I would defer to them and keep up with that. Check out that product update briefing Kevin put up. You're
all
welcome.
right.
Great. All right, let me end that.
Yeah, let's see
And
those
share those
responses.
results so you can kind of see we've got a lot of database managers with us
Yeah.
today. Few
Smart
other
people.
things. Wide range of how long y'all have used Razor's Edge. And relationship says, I feel like I should have put, I'm ready for a breakup instead of not great at all, but we'll see where y'all are. Hopefully we'll get you a little bit better with that. So
Yeah.
joining in.
Awesome. Well, we're going to jump right into our content and start talking about data health. So, I'm going to pull up our sample environment here, and this left nav got changed a few months ago, and some things got moved around. But what data health used to be, I think maybe on its own or in a different drop down, it's now under the constituent drop down. And we're just going to talk a little bit about a couple options here that you should be taking advantage of because back in the day, Address Finder used to be a service you had to pay for. I believe it's included in everyone's subscription. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's included in everyone's subscription with Razor's Edge NXT now. This is a service that once you sign up for it, it runs automatically every 3 months, so 4 times a year, and it screens your whole database, or and you can also submit just a list of records as well, but it will screen your addresses against the National Change of Address Registry with the post office. So when you move, you fill out that little form from the post office so that if mail gets sent to you at your old house, it will automatically forward to your new house. That is a database that's kept by the post office, and so um, Blackbaud will screen your addresses against that National Change of Address Registry. And if one of your constituents has moved and has filled out the form, Blackbaud will find that in that registry and then automatically update your addresses um, in your database. So it's a really cool kind of set it and forget it feature, and it allows you to kind of stay current with your donors and your constituent addresses. It will move the current address to former. It'll put an end date on it. It'll bring that new address in, formatted and with the date from. It's really, really helpful to keep track of those changes. Also, duplicate records is here as well under data health. We're doing a really good job in our all 1,000 records of our test environment. But this will update, I think daily. It updates a lot, but you'll see this. There should be a number here. You can click on it and go through kind of that constituent merge process or at least cleanup to identify which records are duplicates and which ones aren't. Christine, do you have anything to add for either one of those things?
One thing I do want to mention about the duplicates is if someone else from your organization has marked them not a duplicate, you still can have duplicates out there that don't show here. So it's always worth keeping an eye on your mailing list. I always would run a mailing list and sort by address and different things in advance to kind of look to see if something is popping that isn't flagged here. So I say that just to say this is a great tool, but keep doing some due diligence on your own as well.
It is a tool. It is not the tool.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So next up, properly linked contacts. So the kind of the overall overarching theme of today is we're talking about mailing lists, but that really starts with kind of managing your individual records. So just the kind of two things I wanted to point out here is linking constituent records together. And so we're going to start from an individual standpoint. We're going to look at spouse records. So I'm going to jump into my record here in our test environment. And I have my relationship tile moved up to the top of my constituent view. So we should see it here in just a second. Yep, there are my relationships. And so my whole example here is I'm going to add a spouse. So I'm going to click on this individual relationship. And there's just one thing. This is kind of straightforward and pretty self-explanatory, but there's one thing I wanted to point out that makes this well, just one thing I wanted to point out. So I'm going to find my wife's record, and we're moving oh so quickly today. And we want to put a relationship here, spouse, and Kevin's the spouse, and Joy's the spouse. This checkbox I wanted to call out. This is a very powerful tool, not only in spousal relationships, but in business relationships, which we'll get to next, is to automatically soft credit this individual for gifts. Now, as you see here, when I created this didn't automatically get checked. We always want to make sure if this is what we want to do, we want to make sure this gets checked. So what this means is if I have this checked and I'm gonna save it, the next time I go and add a new gift on my record, or my wife's record, the spouse will automatically get soft credited for that gift. So it keeps, if you are at an organization where both spouses have their own individual records, this keeps kind of lifetime giving for the household current and automatic, and you're not something you have to go back and remember to do. Um, so that's very powerful. You can also, if you haven't done this historically, you can import that change in as well. Um, Not something I'm going to go through today because we could probably have a whole class just on importing those kind of relationships, but you can update that through an import. The second thing I want to do is we're going to do something very similar, and that's linking individuals with organizations contacts. And the process is exactly the same. And I'm actually already listed here as, but I'm going to add another one. I'm going to add my wife here to my family foundation. And actually, I don't even know why I'm showing this to you again because the process is exactly the same. We have the option of linking to a constituent record. You can also link to a non-constituent record here as well. If you start to type in, you can hit new here, and you can kind of add the person on the fly. We have relationship and reciprocal, just like we did for the individual relationships. And then when you select a constituent, that checkbox will pop up down here to automatically soft credit. So this is something that when we think about organization giving, if that giving through the organization starts with the owner or the manager, or if it's a family foundation, you want to make sure that that individual also gets soft credited. You want to make sure that that checkbox is checked. Christine, you have anything else here?
Yeah, so just to kind of, we did have a comment asking us to slow down, so I think there may have been a couple questions about some of these connections here. Um, just kind of really want to highlight that linking our spouses with the correct relationship coding and linking our contacts with the correct relationship coding is the only way we can account for them using tools in Razor's Edge appropriately. So just putting relationship types on relationship records doesn't do all of that. So if there's more that we're missing in that, I'm happy to help expand at the end. Just kind of wanted to make sure that was the part that was clear.
Yeah, Candy, I apologize for moving so quickly. If you polled all of my clients, the one complaint, or maybe one of many complaints they'd have, is that I move a little bit too quickly. So I apologize. I will slow down a bit. All right. So the biggest thing that when we talk about mailing lists is avoiding duplicates. The last thing we want to do um, is upset our donors when they get three of the same pieces of mailing on the same day in the mail. Like that's a waste of money. It's a waste of resources, and it doesn't make our organization look any good. So we have a few tips here that Christine's going to go over here to try to avoid duplicates.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here is not duplicate constituents as much as seeing records showing up duplicate in a mailing list. And I know this is probably really basic for a lot of people, but it's not for everybody. So I want to make sure we highlight if you are exporting directly from Query, you are going to see duplication because Query is a grouping tool. And in your output, Query is going to show you every instance that something meets your criteria. So if you have constituent code in your output, and I have 3 constituent codes, I will be showing up in your output 3 times with 3 different rows, one for each constituent code. That expands if I have 4 email addresses and 3 constituent codes. And so a lot of people complain that they're spending a ton of time cleaning these lists up. The answer to that is really not spending time in Excel cleaning it up. It's using the tools that Razor's Edge has built in place to avoid seeing that duplication of rows. Export does this as well as Razor's Edge Mail. Currently, both of these live in the database view. I say currently with an asterisk because we know Blackbot is working on updating these things. We're seeing movement to the web view rapidly. Next week, we could all be saying, this is in web view. Isn't this amazing? As of today, this is still in database view. Really and truly, both of these can work in different ways. There are certainly things that Razor's Edge Mail can do that Export can't do simply because of what it was built for. But both of them will allow you to ensure that you only see the same constituent in a single row when you get your final export from the tool. So we'll kind of talk a little bit of some of the other pieces in there. Mail allows you to send it to an individual's home or their business or both. So if I am correctly linked as a contact to NPact and I'm on your list as a donor and you want to send it to both NPact and me personally, mail allows you that as an option to choose. If you were in export, you don't have that kind of a functionality of layering. You would just send it to everything that met the criteria. Both mail and export allow you to choose with spouses if you want to send it to both spouses, the first spouse found, or the head of household. So there's a lot of pieces in knowing those two tools that allows you to kind of tweak what you're doing, choose some settings, and reduce sending your mailings out more than one time when it comes to spouses and contact relationships. Anything you'd add to that, Kevin? I think that's probably a wordy explanation of all of that, but I hope it's helpful for everybody to kind of get an
Yeah.
idea of when you might want to choose one of those two tools instead.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add with this last bullet here, one per household. Um, for a lot of our organizations, not all, but a lot of our organizations, we end up having, especially at schools, we have constituent records for students and for parents, maybe both parents individually. So just kind of one thing to keep in mind is that um, even if you decide to do just head of household processing, so you have one kind of row for a set of spouses, you may have to also evaluate if there is anyone else at that household that is also receiving that mailing and kind of how to deal with it. Sometimes you want to send a mail to everyone that's at the household. Sometimes it's only one per household. So just something else to kind of keep in mind.
And Carrie did highlight the seasonal addresses in export. That's in export and mail. So if you have a lot of seasonal addresses, that's great. And Julie, your question about eliminating children at the same address. I think this is an age-old question of if we have ages, I think using your query to remove everyone under a certain age. If you're a school and they're marked as students, I would use a same thing. Like in your query, try to remove anyone under age. Beyond something like that, finding that same address becomes a really challenging thing because of our grouping, but certainly
We're
would
going to
be
show you.
something we could, yeah, there's
Yeah,
definitely ways to do that in your query and things like that if you have markers on those records to do so.
yeah, we're also going to show here at the end. I got a spreadsheet that we're gonna look at that. There's some way to do that evaluation in Excel as well that will kind of help you do that last check before you send your list to the mail house.
Awesome.
All right, Christine, you want to get into some examples?
So we talked about this a little bit just on the last slide, but including context. So if you're working in query and you would just say, I want to see the contact, it's going to show you every single contact for that organization. Most likely you don't want to send it to every contact. You just want to limit that down. So if you're working in both in either export or mail, it kind of lives in some different places. You can choose to say, I want to send this to all contacts, or I want to send it to specific contact types. And you can kind of build out a hierarchy for that. You can also choose in export how many contacts. If you say, I want to send it to 3 contacts, sort it by order of preference. I typically use a date added if I'm doing something like that, just to try and get the more current records for that. But this really goes back to that data health piece because not only do you have to have them linked as an employee, you have to have them linked as a contact. And very often, I think you need to have a contact type on those records so that you can divide them up and say, this is the person we send this type of mailing to versus another. And I'd love to give you some specific categories, but unfortunately, that's one of those things that just differs so much by organization. So maybe it's something about, we send solicitation to this person, we send stewardship to that person. Some people maybe get multiple pieces, but you really just have to think through as an organization, what does your contact look like with organization contacts? I should not have used contact twice in that sentence. Sorry. What does your communication look like with those contacts, and how do you need to structure it and build that out so that you know which contact gets which mailing? So Melanie, yes, solicit codes help, but this is really more about those specific contacts, and that would not connect, that wouldn't help necessarily with the solicit code on the contact record.
Yeah, do you want to jump into this example, Christine?
Yeah, so this is actually, look, if you go to the organization address tab on the mailing, there you go. because people are watching. There's that
Yeah.
button that says, for step one says mail to contacts, mail to the organization. Step two says contact information, and then it says all contact types. But if we choose that contact type, we can select just specific types. We can also, under that, limit by attributes. So you could use that instead. If you have an attribute on the relationship, it can't be on the constituent. I believe it has to be on that relationship. But you can limit them down by those two things. And then under that, it says if a contact also receives this mailing as an individual, mail to both addresses separately, mail to just individual, or mail to contact. So you do have a little bit of functionality to choose which is more important to you, or if you want it to go to both. I think this is really useful if you have these types well defined. And Carrie, I totally agree. I wish people could have more than one contact type. Unfortunately, they don't let us. We don't get to decide, but we should vote for that in the idea bank because I think that would be a very useful tool for all of us. Anything you'd add to this part, Kevin?
I don't think so. Yeah, I was reading the end of Carrie's comment. Yeah, so the way to get around that is just having more than one relationship with the same person, and then you're able to have different contact types. That's the one thing I would add there. Oops. Um,
Right.
what else? Anything else we want to talk about here?
I know we're coming
Christy.
back to the segmentation in a minute, but I think
Yeah, this is we're gonna jump into this tab next because this is really where our email kind of shines and allows you additional functionality aside from just exporting. Um, Anything we want to talk about here?
this is
Yeah, so if you're an organization that uses seasonal dates, it's always good to pay attention to this first step here for individual addresses. I always tell clients that. Use a specific date here, and this is the day that the mailing is going to hit the mailbox. Oftentimes, if we use seasonal dates, we use the first day of the month or the last day of the month to signify kind of when that your constituent moves or maybe has an additional address. So always make sure this date is super specific to the day that you think your mailing is going to drop, so you get the most up-to-date address for seasonal address.
So Ruth's question about a query, you didn't miss that. We kind of jumped ahead a bit, but when you're using the our email tool, and this is specifically quick letters, you do start on that first tab with a query. So right now that says include, and then it says QL for K12LL. That's selected records. That's our starting query that we're working with. The mail tool actually customizes this down from there. So everyone who is in the query may not actually end up in our ultimate mailing list. That's just our starting base. So under the head of household processing, we've already set that to say only those marked head of household. So we've tweaked that query down to say if you've included both spouses, we're only sending it to the one who's head of household. Just as a side note, every spouse relationship has a head of household. If you didn't intentionally set it, it's going to be whoever's record you were on when you linked the spouse connection. So it doesn't matter gender, it doesn't matter anything else. It's not even whose record is older. It's whatever record you were on when you linked them is automatically head of household unless you say otherwise.
I just learned something new today, Christine. I don't know if I knew that. I always thought it
There,
was the
that,
oldest record. Yeah,
there's your tip of the day.
there you go.
In 20 years, I have seen one time where Razor's Edge glitched and there was not a head of household and it caused the nastiest error messages and I had to spend a long time with support to fix it. And it was an error. So there is always a head of household. It's just whoever you start with. Um, my tip of oh wait, did I just say a tip of the day? I don't know.
Was it? Well, it was. I think it was what I just learned.
Kevin
Yeah.
just
So
said, yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
What?
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so whoever you're on when you link them is the head of household by default. So if that helps you as you're linking them to kind of follow your organization's preferences on who is head of household, start from their record and then link the spouses, and then you don't have to worry too much about who became that head of household. The other piece here is we've unchecked deceased. Would probably uncheck no valid address as well, but this is the sample database. I don't know if we'll have anyone left if we uncheck all the boxes. So I just say that to say in your real database, probably you want to do that differently.
Yeah, the other thing to note here is for individual addresses on step 4 of this of tab 5, it asks you what do you want to do when there is no valid address found. And so you can choose to print the person with no address, remove them altogether, or you can say to pick a different address if it doesn't find one to mail to.
And I'm a big fan of remove from run because when I'm doing a mailing list, I don't see any point in including them if they have no address. But keep in mind if you do that and the send mailbox in database view, send mailbox is a positive and it has to be checked to work here. In database view, it's a negative and it says do not send. But if all of their addresses say do not send in web view, this will remove them from your run. So keep an eye on that. If people aren't pulling into your mailings, that's a good place to check. And the org address tab actually has a separate, it also allows you to say what to do if you have no contact. So if you click on that drop down, you can actually tell it, if I don't have a contact to send this to, you can remove them from the run for that as well. So these are a couple layers that you can't get anywhere else to be able to be this nitty gritty and say, just remove it if there's no contact. Just remove it if there's no actual address without even putting that in your query.
Christine,
Oh yeah, go for it.
are we allowed to disagree
On what?
on this? I
Well, you
think.
can disagree with me. I still think I'm right.
I think it's valid to, or it's a good idea to, if they don't have an address found, is to print them with no address. Because one of the things we want to make sure that if there is a VIP that you absolutely want to make sure gets this mailing, and for whatever reason they happen to not have an address, a mailable address at that time, we want to know that information before we actually send them, send the mailing list off to the print house. So print it with no address, so that way you can kind of go through that as a last check to make sure, oh, I need to make sure I go find an address to mail to this VIP or this person that absolutely needs to get the mailing list. It's more work when you get to Excel, but I think it's kind of a good process to get into just to make sure you're covering all your bases.
Yeah. No, I get that. And it's
Yeah.
kind of just a preference piece. So yeah, I get why you would do that. And I think everyone just has to figure out what's best for them in that situation too. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and go to the segment piece
Yeah.
because that's the other part of this that there's really not many places in Razor's Edge where you can do this. And I just want to preface segmentation with this is the deep dive in Razor's Edge of thinking this whole thing through and building out your logic. You really do need a good understanding of query in order to do this and do this well. So I know we've done it. Well, Kevin and I've done another webinar on this. So we're going to include that webinar recording alongside this webinar recording when we send this out. Because I know we've only got a short amount of time to talk this through, and I want to make sure you have all the resources there if you're going to start to use this. So when we're working with segmentation, we had our main query on the general tab, and that was everybody that we wanted in our mailing. When you get to this tab on the left, those input queries, those are the different groups we want to break our mailing up into. So we've only got 2 groups for this particular sample mailing. You can get way more, let's say way more fun, because I'm a data geek and I love this stuff, but you can build out way more than that. You could break this into 25 groups if you really want to. And you would just stack those queries here in order of how you want to break them out. So if we want to send current parents one version of this mailing, we would put a query at the top row for our current parents. I would recommend we use an appeal and a package so that we differentiate that group. Then we would add a second query. I have no idea what this QL for K-12 was. We made it too long ago. I've slept and I forgot. But it's a second
It's a
query.
alumni. Yeah.
It's some kind of a group of our constituents. That's our second group. I would put a separate combination of appeal and package. Generally, same appeal, different packages is my preference, but that's just a piece. You cannot fall in more than one query. So in this example, if they're in the first query, that's the appeal and package they get. They do not get the second one, even if they're in the same, if they meet that criteria too, because it stops wherever you hit first. But so that's kind of where you stack these queries in order of what letter they would get in order of that priority. So these can be all different kinds of segments. I know some of our questions were about what segment should I use? And that is really like saying, what is the best restaurant in your city to go visit? I absolutely have multiple restaurants that I love, but if I tell you to go to my favorite Chinese restaurant or a Mexican restaurant or Italian restaurant and you don't like that food, that doesn't really work for you. So it's really a piece where it so much depends on your communication priorities, what data you have, what are you using the segment to track or to communicate. It can be any number of things. It's really what you need. Yes, I saw the question about different letters for volunteers and donors. Absolutely. So you could have one query of donors, one query of volunteers, and you can split it between the two. If you wanted a separate letter for people who are both donors and volunteers, I would put that one first, then do the other two. So yeah, there's lots of things. Candy, you set up the input query titles when you create the queries. So you have to build the queries, link them here, and then that can work. The output queries you can set up from here because it will just make a query of everybody who fell into this group. But the input queries are set up when you build those queries. I know segmentation is a deep dive, but happy if you have anything else, let me know. Happy to kind of give you a bit more information on that.
Yeah, this is like one of my favorite. I agree with whoever said Aldera. Yeah, like this is one of my favorite sections that doesn't necessarily, I don't know if I've ever seen in any like Blackbaud University classes where they deep dive into this, but this is such a powerful tool for us to use like as we're doing our mailing list. It's just it saves so much of that manual kind of sorting and doing all that work in Excel where we want to split up our mailing list. This just kind of does the work for you. It's super helpful.
And just to answer Joanne's question, yes, in the fields to include, you can tell it to export their appeal and package
Yep.
into your file. So you can assign those to the records from the segment tab, or you can just export which group they were in with that appeal and package code, and that will divide them up.
Yeah, Carrie. So if you are sending the data to a mail house, yeah. So the next step that we were going to get to after the segment is actually exporting it out. And this used to be a lot more powerful before we lost our Microsoft integration. But now the only option is to export. And when you hit that button, you're just exporting out that CSV file. And so um, that will dump it into Excel, and then you can send it to your mail house.
So we got a bunch of questions.
I'm trying to catch up.
With the spouses, that's going to depend on if you've included both spouses on the first tab or not. If you've only marked it to go to one spouse, they're only going to get the mailing connected to that spouse, which is why I know like setting your head of households based on your data priorities is really important. That's a whole conversation in and of itself. Peg, if you use all records, that if you have a small database, that may be completely right for your situation. I would say that answer to that is it depends on your situation and your needs. And Beverly, we assume that Blackbud will do this in WebView, but we can't speak to that specifically. Brenda, it may or may not take away your merging queries. It depends on if you're using those merges to get a complicated query for your starting base, or if you're using those merges as a way to build out different segments. This takes a query and allows you to divide it into separate groups. So the very common use for this would be, I forget who said it, but they're sending a year-end letter and they want one version to the volunteers and one version to the donors, but they want them all coded for the year-end mailing. This would make it really easy to have one appeal for year-end mailing that has two different packages, one for volunteer, one for donor. We can assign that to those records on the constituent level when we run this process. We can then have reporting in Razor's Edge to say, how did our whole year-end mailing do for everyone we sent it to? And how did each of those packages do? So it gives us the tracking metrics from assigning it, but it also gives us the ability to easily separate that list and say, who got this package, who got that package, send those letters from here. So it's a bit complicated to start doing, but once you get it in, the metrics are amazing.
Yeah.
Hope that helps answer your questions.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, and feel free if you get more questions, drop them in the chat. We'll have hopefully have a couple minutes here at the end to
And we'll
go over.
definitely send we did talk about this in a bit more depth in a previous webinar, so we'll come back to that. And we'll send you that. I'm sorry. We'll send you that in the follow-up.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about quick letters, and remember that last step is actually exporting the data into Excel. And so I have a test. This is just I exported out all of our addresses and constituent information from our test environment. There's about a thousand records here. One of the things that I would suggest doing before just kind of blindly sending off, I don't know if we would do this or not, but just before blindly sending off this address file to our mail house, is I always encourage clients to just sort by all of the columns that kind of make the most sense, right? So um, I start with address line because there may be an address that just has maybe a space or something in it to where you get like this kind of results. And we're just going to go ahead and delete those before we send it because that is obviously if they don't have an address, they're not going to get the mailing. So we can just delete those rows out. But the other thing, and I mentioned this earlier, the other thing that it allows us to do is when you have multiple people from the same house on your mailing list. Again, you have to figure out how you're going to manage those, but by sorting by address line, you can it kind of jumps out at you. And like in this example, we've got the same address but different apartment numbers, so we'll let that go. But one of the things that I wanted to show you that I like to do is I have this formula up here. So once we've sorted it by address line, we can do a comparison that just looks at this cell compared to this cell, all kind of all the way down, and it will draw out all the ones that match up. Um, it will draw out all the ones that match out up. Let me make sure here. Yeah, so we're doing that right. And yeah, so you can just kind of do a quick glance down this row and see, oh, if I see a one here, that means that this address matches this address. Organization and individual, we just got to figure out how we want to handle this. We're probably going to delete this row out, maybe because we don't want the same address to get the mailing twice. But well, you see one thing it doesn't do. If we look at these two rows right here, the one thing it doesn't do is because this is Maine with an ST and this is Maine with the street spelled out, it's not going to flag that row as being a duplicate because it's not a duplicate. It's the street doesn't match up. So one of the things I also have here, I'm just going to bring this over because I have it hidden. There it is. I have a little bit of a better formula in my opinion. And I don't think we have time to go through the kind of logistics of this. I will send out a copy of this formula here, but basically what it's doing is comparing the first five characters of this row with the first five characters of this row. So it's the same kind of idea, but it's only looking at five characters at a time. And most of the time, those are going to catch, and I think I have them highlighted here. Yeah, most of the time it's going to catch these examples. Um, so yeah, and it's just again one last thing to do, just to like double, triple check our mailing file before we send it out. Um, and that way, because in the kind of just the way it's formatted here, these ones kind of jump off the screen to us, and just so we can kind of just scroll down kind of quickly and see when you see a one, you need to go look at that. Some of them are false positives, but a lot of them, like this one, for example, is going to catch that. Okay. That was my Excel demonstration in a quick mode. Oh, the other thing I want to point out, especially if you're in the Northeast, and I'm sure you've had to deal with this forever, is if you have an Excel document versus a CSV, a lot of times Excel will drop the leading zero if you have a 5-digit zip code. So you may need to go back and manually add that leading zero into your zip code, and then save it as a CSV. The kind of the shortcut for that is an apostrophe, I think. So if you do like apostrophe 04512, it'll leave the leading zero there. It'll change the format of the cell to something other than number, so it doesn't drop the leading zero. So, but when you sort by zip code, you'll see that those will kind of all jump together. Christine, anything else to add here?
Um, no, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
we're good on that.
Yeah, we've got 4 minutes left, and we have some rapid fire questions. So,
We do. And Aldera, I think, answered our first one in the chat a little bit ago about formatting addresses to Canadian Post standards. There are some address formats in Razor's Edge, and we have got a link for that. But we'll also include the information from the chat from Eldera. Thank you to our Canadian friend for helping these Americans out with good intel.
Yeah. Um, this was a question that got submitted. What is the difference between a static query and a dynamic query? Static query is point in time information. So when you go to save the query, it'll create these invisible flags on the records. And so that the results from that query at the time that you saved it will be included in the results there. Dynamic query, every time you hit results, it's going to update to uh, it'll update the query based off the criteria. So static is point in time, dynamic is real time.
Can it automate mailings in Razor's Edge NXT? Not yet. I say yet because I don't know if that will come or not, but that is definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I would for number 4, I would love to know if there's any additional information about this question, but how can I consistently export the same fields? Um, Exports in database view, set up your export and save it. That way you can run it with the same fields every time. You're just going to change the query out from it. I don't know if that hopefully that answers that question. But yeah, just use export and save it.
And then pledge reminders at the moment, the best way to do that is still database view. In the mail tool, there is a pledge reminder tool that allows you to export out upcoming installments. I don't think it's going to export out a table of the planned installments per the way the question was formatted here. Um, it's very it's very much like just the next thing due kind of a format. So if you need a table of all future installments, you probably will have to do that manually at this point in time. Although I know that Letterbox from RedArc has some pledge functionality for reminders that Razor's Edge does not have. I believe it is all in their paid version, but if you have a lot of pledges and you need something that you can't do in Razor's Edge, they're a great option to check out.
Yeah. Um, and we are quickly approaching the end of our time together. I know there was a ton of questions in the chat. Hopefully we got to all of them, or most of them. If you have any, you have a couple minutes left to maybe send them again so we can make sure we get those answered. And also maybe we can you can kind of go back through the recording and see if we kind of skipped over anything. But yeah, we love all of the interaction in the chat. This is great. You guys all had some great suggestions, and some additional comments to what we were talking about. Upcoming events here at NPact. That QR code on the screen will take you to our event page on our website that has all this information. But tomorrow, Christine is presenting with Double the Donation, talking about harnessing employment data to unlock workplace giving opportunities. That sounds very interesting. So the link is on our event page to register for that. Our 2 level up webinars for July are the 16th and the 23rd. So if you have folks that use Financial Edge in your office, make sure you send them the invitation for reconciliation and month close on July 16th. And then we're going to talk kind of deep dive into gift management next month. So we'll be talking about pledges and pledge installments and everything else.
Adjustments and amendments and
All that adjustments and all that stuff.
all the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Just a real quick about what we do here at NPact with our clients. We we have a couple fixed rate options, a database assessment. So if you come to us and say my database is in a mess and I don't know where to start, we can do kind of a formal assessment of your rate of your Razor's Edge or Financial Edge database. We do a lot of on-site, a lot of virtual training. And then we also just we'll sell you a bucket of consulting hours that if you have stuff that you don't know how to do or you don't have time to do, you can pass that information off to your consultant and have them do it for you. So those are kind of the ways that we work with our clients. And did you already launch this poll question, Christine?
Nope, doing it right now.
Last poll question of the day. Who is ready to help us make the most of your data? If you hit, I'm ready to schedule a call today, I will be reaching out to you by the end of the week. But maybe it's not right now. Maybe it's later in the year. Maybe it's next year. And I did see a lot of our current clients on the call. So we're very super happy and grateful for you all to be joining us. Yeah. And on our last slide, our contact information. Feel free to reach out to either Christine or myself if you have questions or follow up about the webinar today, or if you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, we're always making sure that our information that we share with you is evergreen and helpful. So if you have any topics specific to Razor's Edge, please let us know, and we're happy to talk about them in a future webinar.